Coming up, the U.S. Attorney General's trip to the front lines of Alaska's battle against alcohol, sexual assault, and domestic violence.
It's hard for me to imagine that there are more vulnerable population in the United States.
From Alaskans far and wide, a desperate plea for help.
Our people are dying.
A misery factor so high, the Attorney General calls it an emergency. Ahead, Alaska's invisible epidemic on full display.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief that the best is yet to come, bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to Frontiers, a show that is usually about the positive, adventurous side of our state. But there's a darker side to being a frontier that we've been slow to confront. Crimes against women and children have almost been like those proverbial frogs in the pot who tolerate the heat on the stove. But now the state has the attention of the U.S. Attorney General, who agrees violence in rural Alaska has reached a boiling point.
We're just going to span out this way.
When a 10-year-old girl from Kotzebue went missing and was found dead, it shook Alaskans out of the fog of complacency. The nightmare. Ashley Barr Johnson died a victim of sexual assault. And since then, other women now say the man who killed her raped them when they were children. Emblematic of a silent epidemic that now has a voice.
I stand here as an Alaska Native man in front of Alaska Native women, our children, our grandchildren, to say enough's enough.
At this gathering of Native leaders in Anchorage, the U.S. Attorney General heard a familiar theme.
The statistics speak for themselves.
Justice delayed is justice denied.
The entire village was in lockdown status and gripped in fear of becoming victims themselves. The suspect was at large, freely roaming the streets.
Leonard Wallner, who heads up the Village Public Safety Officer program in the Prince William Sound area, says it took troopers almost a full day to respond.
Unforgivable, but not at all uncommon.
I heard elders that I love and respect stand up and say they feel that a Tlingit means less to the state of Alaska than a moose. And that's because if a moose gets shot out of season in 3 hours, 3 wildlife law enforcement folks will be there. A young Tlingit girl is murdered, and it can take 19 hours.
I've always thought it's critical that our legal system work for every American and that no one be left out of that.
But the reality, shaped by state budget cuts, has left rural Alaskans mostly unprotected.
When I came into the room this morning, I noticed that the media is here, and I also noticed that there were 6 cameras. We have 6 VPSOs in our region that serve 56 tribes.
6 VPSOs to cover the entire Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, a region the size of the state of Oregon. A region the Attorney General will soon visit.
The police department is bringing them in at about 25 a week.
From the backlog of rape kits at the state crime lab to long unsolved murders of Native women, William Barr will soon head to the front lines of a battle that needs more soldiers, more dollars, and most of all, the will to face the truth. The Native leaders who met with the Attorney General in Anchorage told him that it's more than a matter of money, that people need help to help themselves. That was echoed in William Barr's trip to Galena, about 270 air miles west of Fairbanks. Barr flew there in an Alaska Air National Guard C-130. After another plane he was supposed to fly in needed some repairs. Galena is a hub for 10 interior Alaska communities near where the Yukon and the Koyukuk rivers meet. Leaders from the Tanana Chiefs Conference asked Barr to push for a change in federal laws to give tribes in Alaska more jurisdiction over crime. They also told William Barr that Alaska tribes are not eligible for many federal justice programs, and the rules need to be adapted to meet some of Alaska's unique circumstances. And they outlined the crisis at hand. A rate of sexual assault for Native women 12 times the national average, a suicide rate 6 times higher, and alcohol-related deaths 3.5 times the national rate. These numbers are disproportionate. Although Alaska Natives make up 19% of the state's population, they account for almost half of the reported rapes. Some other eye-openers: almost all rural crimes are alcohol-related. And there's fallout from that. 1 out of 4 young people suffer post-traumatic stress. Also, out of 229 communities, only 40 have village public safety officers. An Anchorage Daily News and ProPublica investigation, also cited often to the Attorney General, found that 1 in 3 rural communities have no local law enforcement officers. Coming up, the Attorney General's visit to Bethel and beyond.
Got a gun pointed to me. Punched up, beaten up pretty bad.
Silent no more. Voices from the front lines of Alaska's war on violence. The next stop on the U.S. Attorney General's tour, Bethel, 400 miles west of Anchorage, a hub for a region about the size of the state of Oregon. Bethel serves about 50 communities, almost all of them off the road system, reachable only by airplanes, boats, and snow machines. 2 days before the U.S. Attorney General's trip to Bethel, we visited the Tundra Women's Coalition shelter, which has 33 beds. When we arrived, 35 souls were there and more expected.
TWC, how can I help you?
The calls that come in are from women who are at best hours away from help. Many live in communities where there is little or no law enforcement and must fly across what seems like an endless sea of tundra to get to Bethel. But if the weather is bad, it can be days before they can reach safety.
In some cases there's strangulation, women who come in severely beaten, sexual assaults.
Ina Marie Chaney helps to manage the cases here at the shelter. Sometimes when a call comes in, she can hear the abuser in the background as children cry out in terror.
There's times when we're on the phone with the victim and we're on the other line with the troopers.
And then when they finally reach the safety of the shelter,
they're still scared, they're still shaken up, they're sad, they're hurting.
And exhausted. That's why the shelter steps in at first to help women with their children so they can rest. At first, some sleep for days. The first time in a long time, they feel safe enough to close their eyes.
It's hard going through it by yourself, and I know what they're going through.
Pam Oney works as an advocate for women and children. She says it wasn't all that long ago that she turned to the shelter for help.
Got a gun pointed to me. Punched up, beaten up pretty bad.
She says somehow violence in small, isolated communities is far more toxic than in cities because it's tolerated more and can seem almost normal. Is it hard to see what you see?
It is, especially with the kids. Seeing the trauma that the family is going through, and you can't help but worry, where those children are going to end up.
Sometimes they end up sexually assaulted. And thanks to federal funds, there's a room here at the shelter where they can be examined by a doctor or a nurse.
This is a sample kit
to collect evidence of sexual assault to be sent to the state crime lab in Anchorage. But sometimes it's hard to collect the evidence in time.
It's a huge issue because it may have happened last night, but it may be 3 or 4 days before we're able to get them in sometimes.
Dr. Jennifer Prince says it's not just the children who are affected by the assault.
Imagine being a mother that had been abused as a child and then having this happen to her child, or a grandmother that had this happen to her daughter and now to her granddaughter.
A cycle that might explain why the misery factor is so high, especially for children who grow up in communities where violence is a fact of life. The day the U.S. Attorney General toured the shelter, each of the 33 beds were taken, and occupancy had surpassed more than 50. Women and children squeezed in wherever space could be found. He said the problem to him was no longer academic. Alaska, the first state the Attorney General has visited since his appointment, surrounded by more security than any village will probably ever see.
I'm from Gwich'luk.
Here at the shelter, staffers want William Barr and Senator Lisa Murkowski to see how they've been able to do so much with so little.
It's much less scary than having to go to the hospital.
Amid the darkness, there is light.
I actually started off as a child in the shelter.
Annie Mae Lee came to this shelter as an 8-year-old who thought her family's violent household was normal. And that, she told the Attorney General, is a widespread problem.
There may be other communities elsewhere that are facing the same kinds of problems, but it's hard for me to imagine that there are more vulnerable population in the United States.
Barr promised he would do as much as possible to help.
One of the things we have to do is be imaginative and aggressive.
But just what the Attorney General means by that remains to be seen. If there was one thing you hope he takes away, what is that?
Don't forget us. We're here.
Perhaps what will make Alaska unforgettable? A trip to NAPASKIAK, a community a few miles downriver from Bethel.
Our tribal council's waiting.
This is what Senator Lisa Murkowski wanted Barr to experience, to see and feel what life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness is like in a community with so many struggles.
And right here we have our watering point.
Although NAPASKIAK is dry, it's drowning in alcohol smuggled in from Bethel and Anchorage. The jail is primarily used as a sleep-off center for drunks to keep everyone safe.
They found him down here. There's a cross somewhere.
The Attorney General was shown the spot right off the boardwalk where a 14-year-old boy died from alcohol poisoning. Still, people in NAPASKIAK find hope in their faith and hope in their culture. Only a few generations ago, violence in communities like NAPASKIAK was unheard of.
You know, enough is enough.
Stephen Maxie Jr., the tribal chief, called on the Attorney General to declare a state of emergency.
No matter how poor we are, no matter how much we struggle, the needy of the needy need to live in peace. And we're not at that level. We're not even close to it. Our people are dying. Listen to our people. Listen to our cries. They're real.
The Attorney General agrees. It's time to treat the lack of justice in rural Alaska as an emergency.
You have to see it to understand it, and it's had a great impact on me. And you get to see the people, what great people they are, and also the pressing need that they have for physical security.
As long as the community has the desire to take it back, everything is possible. And these people clearly do.
The Attorney General leaves wearing a traditional handmade kuspik, one he promises to wear to the White House to talk to the president about what can be done to help tribal governments navigate their communities back to a safer and saner world. The Attorney General's visit brought light to a dark subject. Now Alaskans must wait to see what kind of catalyst for change that this might be. And we'll ask our two guests from NAPASKIAK what they think, Sharon Williams and Earl Samuelson. They're here to give us their take on whether the Attorney General's visit to their community will have lasting impact. The Attorney General only spent about 3 hours in NAPASKIAK. He took a half-hour boat ride from Bethel on a search and rescue boat, a Bethel search and rescue boat, and he passed fish camps along the way where people were getting ready for their first subsistence salmon opener of the season. And joining us now to talk about the Attorney General's visit, we have Sharon Williams, the NAPASKIAK Tribal Administrator, and Earl Samuelson, a retired trooper pilot. Both of you have a real good perspective on it, but maybe we could start off. Could you tell us a little bit about NAPASKIAK for those of us who don't know what it's like to live off the river?
NAPASKIAK is 7 miles downstream of Bethel. It only takes about 10-15 minutes to get to Bethel from NAPASKIAK by boat or snow machine. About 450 people live there. Everyone's traditional, cultural.
And speaking of that, of course, there's the subsistence salmon season, which is just getting underway. And I understand that the Attorney General was disappointed that he was a little bit late or early for that.
I know that time of year, I know the salmon is a major issue or food, subsistence food for a lot of the people up and down the river. We thought about that, but it was just a bad timing on his part to come to NAPASKIAK. It's the fish were coming into the river, and now that, because earlier maybe I stated that the river is our store, and a lot of people depend on the salmon to carry them through the winter. But now we're being regulated, and if I may say this, like it was said earlier when Mr. Barr came to NAPASKIAK, there's more officers on the river right now patrolling the fisheries than in our community. As the community, I noticed we had 4 officers in our community. And normally you have 1 or 2 for public safety needs in our community, but with the fishing season on now, you could probably have more than 5 or.
So fish are more important than people is kind of what you're saying.
Just looking at the numbers right now.
So the Attorney General just got such a small glimpse as to what life is like. And I know you took him on a tour on those long boardwalks that you have to walk to get from A to B. I mean, what was important for you to communicate to him?
I was, well, the whole community, including the tribal council, we were focusing on public safety. That's one big issue. We've been struggling for about 2 years, since like 2016, the liquor store opened in Bethel. And that's when the need came in for public safety.
Very big time. Now, one thing you did do is you took him to the jail on a tour, and that's a very primitive looking jail. Why did you want him to see that?
I wanted him to see what we use, what we have to use, and it's the only thing we can use at jail.
So what kinds of people go in the jail? I mean, what are they like when they're put there?
They're mostly intoxicated people that can't take care of themselves. Sometimes they're passed out on the side, outside, or in their homes, and sometimes they get a little violent where they have to call public safety. My hat goes off to those guys. And it's a job that probably nobody wants in a community, but some of these guys want to give back to their community, and that's one way is helping out through public safety services.
Now, one of the things that we want to show you is just your neighbor had a fire in their jail, and it took 2 people's lives. I mean, This is devastating when you have something like this happen, and it seems like a lot of these jails are kind of like death traps.
That's all they have. I mean, like in NAPASKIAK, it's not only that jail, it's to maintain that jail. several times myself, public safety guys would come up for assistance, and like the other day, we went on a call, and they asked for assistance. I called the state troopers, and the next question came up is, I said, well, Earl, we don't have oil to heat up the jail. I said, well, here, take my 5 gallons extra stove oil, take it over and turn on the heat so whoever's in that facility can stay warm.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the maintenance on that facility. Electrical costs are pretty high. Oil costs are high in the villages. I don't know if you know what the oil costs are in Anchorage, but we're looking at probably $6 on the average, probably 6 gallons of
$6 a gallon.
A gallon for 1 gallon of stove oil, not including the gas services.
So let's talk a little bit about the recruitment problems for village public safety officers, village police officers, and tribal officers. Now, you have 4 in your community, 4 officers, but they're part-time officers, right? So, and I hear that 2 may quit. You know, what is the problem that you can't keep these officers?
Our police officers are working 24/7, 365. They're always on the go. They get phone calls one right after another. We have residents who call me on my cell phone and telling me the police aren't answering their phone, so I'll start helping them. Turns out they're already on a call and they can't be answering their phone because they're responding to a call.
Same way with myself, I get calls at home to similar calls is in need of help.
And you're retired, supposed to be anyway.
Well, it's even though it doesn't matter. If someone needs help, we're there to try to help one way or another. And if you don't mind, I would like to just take a few minutes to thank General Mr. Barton for coming to NAPASKIAK to see some of the issues and listen to the people. And I hope it's an eye opener if he can take what he learned from our village and to look at not only us, but the whole region and the whole state of Alaska, because we're just one community. And if he declared our region just a public safety emergency, just thinking about the rest of the state with no law enforcement, as stated earlier, some of these communities have no law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And to get law enforcement when a crime does may take days or weeks because of the weather. But to get out there, we have to fly out there. If the weather's bad, we're not going to make it. So we have to adjust that time. And so it takes time to get out to a community. Even when I was flying for the state troopers, when the weather was bad, if a crime happened out there, we're not going to go. If the weather's bad, we have to make that adjustments.
Well, one of the things I do want to share, and maybe we end on a lighter note here, is it seemed like the Attorney General really enjoyed himself in NAPASKIAK, and we have a little clip of him and a little boy. This was just a little moment. It makes you understand, what it's all about are the kids, really.
That's the future. It's something that, as community leaders in our community, we work for them. That's the next generation that's going to run our community.
But they're seeing all this go on, though. Yeah. That's got to be hard.
It's sad, but it'll get better. Things will get better. You ever hear the saying, you got to hit the rock bottom to rebuild? Mm-hmm. It's kind of like that. If you hit rock bottom, then you rebuild yourself. But don't let the bottom beat you. Stand up and do what's right and rebuild.
And I know in your community, you're certainly trying hard. So I want to thank both of you for joining us, Earl Samuelson and Sharon Williams. Well, we're going to leave you now with a shot of energy here. We're going to leave you with the NAPASKIAK dance group, young, strong people that move with confidence into the future. We want to thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Ni